Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Lookout live stream. Today's the 18th of August, and we're going to talk about the Six Rivers fires, which are still just kind of chunking along. Nothing big to report there. And we'll look a little at the lightning storm that went through yesterday and what it did and didn't do. Going to start off like we do each day, looking over Willow Creek here, and with a disclaimer that I'm doing this as a citizen, not an employee of the Forest Service or Park Service or BLM or CAL FIRE or anyone else. Just I put together intelligence from publicly available sources and then do these morning reports on what I see happening out there. I'm not tied in with the operations on the fire, so I don't know exactly what's going on. I'm just showing you imagery and telling you what I see happening. So we're looking over Willow Creek. White lines show 24-hour increments of spread, so I know it's not real intuitive necessarily, but the red line is where the fire is now. It doesn't mean that the fire is active. That's just the edge of the mapping. So you can see, that the fire is spread. Each day it's spread kind of down this mountain. Anyway, what's happening over here is going clockwise from Willow Creek. This edge is all pretty cold. They finished firing all the way down Coon Creek, and the blue lines on here are places that roads have been prepped as fire lines and used. Brown is where hand lines been cut by people on foot. Black is where they've used bulldozers. And yellow is areas where the fire is cooling off. And then the red, orange is places that the fire is still got some heat. So we've got what we call interior burning here going on inside the fire, where it's kind of filling in areas that haven't burned yet. But not any heat down low here on the wrong side of the fire line. As we come around here to the north side of what was called the Waterman Fire, the fire has not reached the bottom of the canyon, or if it has, it hasn't crossed it. This growth here is the last 24 hours. Brown is places hand lines have been put in. So you see you've got hand line down to the bottom here. I don't know what's going on over here, if there's hand line or if it's too steep. It looks pretty steep. But there's a lot of land that seems too steep that fire gets fought on. But it hasn't crossed. And one thing we've been seeing on a lot of these fires is that they've held up quite a bit when they've got to the riparian areas. It's been smoky, and I don't really know how much aviation support has happened, like helicopter drops on this part of the fire. But that's one of the few open, that's the only really open area of line on this whole north end of the complex. Coming around here, looking back towards the west, this ridgetop road system was fired about a week ago, maybe a little more. There's been a bunch of time here for it to build depth, and the interior is almost done burning out here on the kind of upper part of, I think this is Quimby Creek, Sharber Creek. So that's all good news. We had that kind of storm system yesterday. That was one of those things that we'd been talking about as an opportunity for the fire to move if it was going to. And it doesn't look like it did, really. So that's Campbell Fire. Coming over here, Ammon Fire is still a little bit more active, in that they're still a little bit more active on their firing operations as far as starting new firing and not just having interior. So, dang, got twinkles here. I hate when these. I brought in the satellite heat layer, and it's sparkly for some reason. Okay, so we've been watching the last couple of days as they've fired this Forest Service road that's prepped here to tie in this corner of the fire. Firing's continuing down the hand line slowly here, and looks like they're interior firing. probably with drones, to kind of help this fill in. Another thing that happens sometimes is if you're firing along a road system or something like this and it's not pulling in the way you want, you can come in and create a bunch of interior heat, and that convective kind of lift of that firing. Once you put heat in here, the fire is rising, the heat's rising, and it's pulling in air at the base. So you can kind of steer a firing operation by putting fire down on the ground in the middle of it. So things get pretty wacky at at a certain scale. The firing boss is steering the fire by adding heat in different areas and kind of pulling, hey, we need more depth here. It's not moving. You can see like right in here, the fire only spread, maybe a couple 100 feet in 24 hours. And if your objective is to get this burn out so the fire can't come running, can't go up the slope here and come back out, you might go and put some heat. Or maybe they just wanted to protect this settlement out here, and it could be that they put a ring around that dozer line or something, and then have fired out around that. That looks like it's more likely than that they just went indiscriminate. Anyway, there's more weed being smoked in the Trinity Hills. Like I said, this imagery is 3 years old, so who knows if those people are even in business anymore. It's a tough time to be a cannabis farmer. Anyway, that brings up, kind of interesting topic. We could talk about cannabis industry all day, but what we've seen around here in Butte County is that once we started having a booming cannabis industry in the foothills, a ton of people moved into these really gnarly rangelands that were just brush and grass that had never really been a problem for fires. And more people in the area starts more fires, but then also more people in an area means you need more resources to protect those drying sheds and trailers and other kind of civilization that accompanies resource-based land settlement. So suddenly we had these fires that in the past in Butte County would have been just kind of a couple engines, some dozers, and you would have put them out. And now we have to hire an incident command team and a lot more firefighters and spend $1 million a day. So that's one of those things about settlement patterns on the landscape changing, is that now we have these assets out in the middle of nowhere that we have to protect from wildfire, and it changes how we fight fire. In the case of Butte County, having to go out and do structure protection on all these drying sheds and trailers means that we have less firefighters available to actually control the perimeter of the fire, and so the fires can get bigger. So that's, in my career, that's one thing that's changed, is just that the cannabis land rush has made more work for firefighters and caused fires, larger fires. So discuss among yourselves. Anyway, this fire hasn't really expanded beyond the planned setup here. Over here in Madden Creek, firing. I don't know if they're doing any firing here to get this thing to back down or if it's just backing on itself, but they finished firing down the dozer line and the fire is kind of filling in that gap. Looks like they got through yesterday's storm and any potential outflow winds gracefully. And up here on the upper end of Ammon, same thing. Firing that we've been watching on this kind of gully road corner is still hanging tight. Haven't got a lot of depth there yet, but they haven't lost it over the line. And coming down this south boundary, everything's still staying inside the line. Over here, what used to be the Charlie fire, which is just kind of a chunking along little mess, jumble to confuse us on the progression map. Still some heat out there. It's backing out towards the road. I wouldn't be surprised if this road gets fired as it spreads, but I don't know. Maybe they've got a different plan. Like I said, not appraised, but it is. The imagery doesn't really do justice to some of the places out here of how rugged the land is. Another thing you can see in here is you can see old clear cuts. I was trying to pull up some mapping of that, and if I have time I will, but cut a lot of thickets out here in places that have been logged before, or we, came in and planted a lot of trees afterwards, and now those trees maybe never got thinned, or they're 50 years old. So it adds complexity to the kind of fuel bed, as we'd say. A lot of management history in this landscape. Anyway, what else can we say about these? I want to talk a little about weather and take a minute here to cough my lungs out. Let's see. Give me my weather, people. Of our loop of going back to last night about sunset, showing kind of clusters of lightning strikes. Hardly any in Northern California. People were kind of worried there's going to be a big bust. And they're also worried about it continuing overnight. Didn't get much, really. There's a few strikes out in the Klamath. Storm kind of built up quite a bit of mojo here up kind of between Grants Pass and the coast, Medford and the coast. And you see some strikes come up the crest of the Sierra, some strikes in northeastern California, but quite a bit of moisture. Here's another loop showing kind of the fire, or the last 18 hours, the storm kind of moving in. Here's our fire, Six Rivers fire down here. And then overnight, a lot of moisture pouring into the northeastern corner of the state. It was interesting yesterday to watch the smoke kind of lifting out as the storm clouds kind of built over here, and just to wonder if that instability was going to do anything, and it really looks like it didn't. Here's water vapor. So San Francisco Bay down here, Eureka up here. You can see that there was a bit of moisture that came through with these storms. And another view of that kind of big picture is, down here is Baja and Arizona. And a lot of the times what causes our lightning, our convection, is that these storms kind of tap into what we call monsoonal moisture. It's really wet down in here in Arizona, and flash flooding, and this fires in New Mexico. And so when our storms can kind of tap in and get that connection, you can kind of see the tail of this storm kind of tapping into the moisture down here around, the tip of Nevada. And that just, as it has kind of gone inland, you see more of the moisture in the water vapor. Anyway, the Fire Mappers website is pretty good for showing where there's been dispatches. There's been some smoke jumpers jumping fires in the backcountry, Marble Mountains. So there's some small starts out here. This is Wairika, and coming over across to Crescent City. So kind of between Highway 96 and Scott Valley up in the Marble Mountains. We've got 3 little starts. We've got a couple starts in the Siskiyou Mountains, kind of north of Happy Camp. And then they're not showing up here on the report yet, but there's some fires up here kind of in the Siskiyou Mountains on the Rogue River Forest west of Medford. So that's it for the morning report. We'll keep an eye on this, Six Rivers at this point. We'll see what happens today, but then atmosphere is supposed to get a little more stable, back to the smoke. Hopefully that storm passing through helped clear some smoke out. If nothing else, so firefighters can breathe, but probably get back into smoky conditions. I haven't really had time this morning to look at forecasts. If anything is very exciting happening there, we'll talk about it on our Twitter feed, wildland_ZKO. Zico. All right. This is all made possible by your donations. We appreciate it. It's a different color of the Lookout shirt. Thanks for buying t-shirts. Nice seeing those go out the door. Appreciate all the support.